What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, Under Center, presented by Real Spiel Podcast with Abelson. Week one is officially in the books. We are on to week two. Um, we had a lot of good games in week one, a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of surprises. I hope week two has that same thing in store. There might not be a lot of top end matchups in week two, like there was in week one with all these top 10 matchups, but there is still a lot of good, exciting games going on. So that's what we're here to talk about. Going to dive into some of these matchups. Going to, give you my picks. We're going to try to have a better week this week. Last week we went 2-3 on our picks, so we're going to try to have a better week, and we're going to get to this weekend and enjoy the weekend of college football. So let's get into it. The first game that I want to start with is Oklahoma and Michigan. This is obviously the marquee matchup of the weekend. Uh, I think one of the only few ranked matchups we actually have. And obviously, SEC versus Big Ten, going to have a lot of bragging rights. Michigan and Oklahoma. Um, Going into this game, it's hard to judge either two of these teams based off their week one performance. They both didn't really play anybody significant. I will say, though, coming into this season with Oklahoma, the question was with the quarterback and the offensive line. I think those were the two questions because the defense last year was good. Obviously, the receiver room was hurt, but the offense was the main question. And if you were a Michigan fan, I think you're excited with what you saw with the offense. John Mateer throwing for 397 yards, almost 400, throwing for 3 touchdowns. I think they won 55-0. The offense looked crisp. He looked comfortable and confident out there. This is a guy with experience at Washington State. He's comfortable with the system. Offensive coordinator from Washington State came down and is now the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. So I don't think it was ever going to be a comfortability issue. He's already known the offense. He's been in the system for a while. And it looked good, man. It looked good. I will say the offensive line did look shaky at first, but the more the game went on, I think once they found the 5 units that they wanted to run with, they looked good. But obviously, it's hard to tell. They played a nobody. They play one of the best defensive lines of the last 3 to 4 years in Michigan. They got guys up there who are going to come to play. So I think we'll see and get a real test to see how that Oklahoma offensive line really is. And again, how John Mateer really is. If that game was uh, outlier or if this is, the kind of quarterback he is at the elite Power 5 level or Power 4 level. When it comes to Michigan, Bryce Underwood played good in his first career start. This is a true freshman. He threw for, I think around 200 yards and a touchdown. He looked good. He was making downfield passes. He didn't look great, but he looked good. I think he passed the test for a first year true freshman, making his first career start. He was making a lot of good downfield throws on time and on target. I will say we didn't really get to see a lot of his legs, because that's one key point of him that makes Bryce Underwood. Bryce Underwood is the fact that he is an athletic quarterback. And we didn't really get to see much with his legs. Obviously, again, they were playing, a lesser team. So he obviously didn't really have to use his legs. And he's in a situation where you don't want this guy to get hurt just trying to run around and prove stuff. He obviously got Oklahoma next week, so they probably tamed him back a little bit. But I'm excited to see him play against this Oklahoma defense because one thing with Brent Venables is he's going to put out an elite defense. The defense is never the question. The defense wasn't the question last year. The defense was their only saving grace. They put belt to behind on Alabama. They had a couple good games last year, the defense did, but the offense was the only question with Oklahoma. So I'm excited to see Bryce Underwood against that defense of Oklahoma. That's a tough spot to be, man. And I'm leaning Oklahoma. I'll put it out early. I'm leaning Oklahoma, and I am leaning Oklahoma spread. That is a tough position to be in as a true freshman going into Norman, Oklahoma. The crowd's going to be roaring. The crowd's going to be electric. Night game against that defense. Um, that's a tough position. It's just kind of like the Notre Dame versus Miami game. With this, you got to lean on experience. You got to lean on veteran quarterbacks, and John Mateer, although he was at Washington State, this is a guy who's been starting for a couple years, who's a 4 year player. He's been in the system for a while. He's played good teams back when Washington State was, well, I guess last year was his first year starting, but he still has experience. He still has experience, and that's not something that Bryce Underwood has. So it's tough for me to put my faith in Bryce Underwood. Um, to think that he will be able to go out. We saw this all over the country. First time starters struggling. We saw it with CJ Carr at Notre Dame. We obviously saw it with Arch Manning on the road in a similar environment. We saw it with even Julian Sane. He didn't play bad, but he didn't catch your eye. He didn't light things on fire. So I think that gives a sizable advantage to Oklahoma. So I'm going with Oklahoma on this one. I like them to cover their spread. They're sitting at -5.5 right now. I like that. I also like the total under on this one, points under. I think this is going to be a defensive slugfest. Obviously, Michigan, they've prided themselves on being a good defensive team, good on the trenches. They brought back some good pieces on the defensive line and all over that defense. That's just their identity, is to be a good, excellent defense. They're fast, they're strong, they're physical. So I think they're going to have some success against that Oklahoma offensive line. And I think this is going to be almost like that Ohio State and Texas game, very low scoring. The team that makes the most mistakes is going to be the team that loses. And I also like that. I think the over under was sitting at 46, 47 and a half. So that's another bet that I like. But my lock, my pick is going for Oklahoma -5.5 on this one. For the next matchup, I want to talk about Kansas versus Mizzou. This is a game that we haven't seen in a while. Former rivals that used to play consistently, but yeah, we haven't seen this game in a while, and I think this is a good year to bring this game back. Kansas with the high flying offense of Jalen Daniels. Bo Pabula looked electric in his first game, putting up 60 plus points, throwing for 280 plus yards and a couple touchdowns. I think this game is going to be absolutely electric. Mizzou is a team, for whatever reason, has been getting overlooked the last couple years. This is a team 10 games last year. They won 9 or 10 games the year before. They've steadily been winning 8+ games in the SEC the last few years. I mean, mind it, they did have an easy schedule last year, and they basically have the same schedule this year. So um, for schedule standards in the SEC, it is pretty easy, but at the end of the day, it is still an SEC schedule. Picking up Kansas in the non-conference, Kansas is a team that finished last year winning the last 6 straight games, and they struggled start, but they are not playing around this season. They have just jumped out the gates, beating Fresno State 31-7, dropping 46 on their week 2 matchup, or I guess their technical week 1 matchup since they played in week 0. Jalen Daniels has been looking amazing. He threw for 280 yards and 4 touchdowns the last game. I think this is going to be a high scoring game. Both of these offenses have looked elite, and I think both of these offenses will be elite this year. I who transferred from Penn State. We saw a little bit of him last year, a little bit, not anything enough to get a significant read on him, but he did come in that Wisconsin game, and he kept Kansas afloat, or he kept Penn State afloat when Drew Aller went out with that knee injury. He kept Penn State afloat, got them into the half. Drew Aller obviously came back and finished it off, but I think there's a reason this guy went over the starting job at Mizzou, albeit the quarterback he was in competition did get hurt in their first matchup, so he kind of won it by default. But I still think Bo Pabula would have won the starting job regardless, because I do think he is a talented quarterback, dual threat, has a good arm, can put the ball on the ground and run. Um, I think the play in this one is the total over and under on this one. I think it's sitting at 50 and a half, 51 and a half. Like I said, I think this is going to be an offensive firework. Both of these offenses have obviously shown that they can, put up points this year. But I'm leaning slightly Mizzou. because I do think Mizzou's roster is just slightly better than Kansas's, especially on the defensive end. This was an underrated defensive team last year. I do think they bring back, a good chunk of that. So I think they'll keep some of that momentum going in, especially on the defensive line. I do favor their defensive line compared to, Kansas's offensive line. So I think right now they're sitting at -5, -6.5 Mizzou, and with it being at home, I'm leaning towards Mizzou. This is a tough game though because I've been going back and forth between Kansas 1 second, Mizzou the other second. I would not. I'm gonna say right now, I would not be surprised if Kansas, definitely if Kansas covered. I would not be surprised if they covered that +6.5. But I think I'm gonna stick with Mizzou. I like them to win. I think the roster has just a slight advantage. It's going to be a fun matchup, Jalen Daniels versus Bobby Beulah, but I'm going to give the edge to the home team on this one. Next matchup I'm excited to see is the Cyhawk game, Iowa versus Iowa State. This is always a good early season Big 12 versus Big 10 game. I love watching. Iowa State took it last year with a game-winning field goal. Um, man, I at this point I have completely lost faith in Iowa's offense. Man, this was supposed to be the year that they finally turned it around. They got Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State, of all places, the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, who are a premier FCS school. I'm pretty sure he won like the equivalent to the Heisman in the FCS level. So this is a 4-year quarterback who's has a lot of experience, who has a lot of talent in the FCS level. He comes up, plays a Albany, I think, a nobody team, and he puts up 46 yards and 1 touchdown. Explain it, make it make sense. I now this is it doesn't matter what Iowa's done. They've fired their offensive coordinator. They've put a contract in saying if you can't score more than X amount of points, you're done. They've gotten a multiple solid quarterbacks, and they still cannot play the offensive side of the ball, man. It's honestly embarrassing and it's gross to watch. 34 points, like I said, against Albany. Mark Gronowski. I didn't watch the game, so I'm just looking based off the box scores. But I mean, putting up 44 yards and 1 touchdown with a 26 QBR or quarterback, QBR against Albany, it couldn't have looked good. But nonetheless, I don't have faith in their offense, but I still have so much faith in Iowa's defense. The amount of games they've won over the last couple of years, shutting their opponent down to less than 20 points, not even being able to do anything on the offensive side, and they still somehow won 8-9 games the last few years. I still have faith in their defense, but this is going to be a tough game because Iowa State, unlike Kansas State, everybody's been talking about Kansas State. Oh, the Ireland hangover, coming back from Ireland. And Kansas State almost lost last week to, I think, North Dakota. Um, that hasn't been the case with Iowa State. Iowa State came out last game and they put their foot on the gas. I think they won. I think they scored like 50 or 60 points and gave up like 1 touchdown, if that. Rockleback, he is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. He's just a gamer, man. Led Iowa State to the Big 12 championship game. On path to hopefully do it again. This guy, when people talk about the top quarterbacks in the country, I feel like Rockleback is not a name that's mentioned a lot, but this guy is a gamer, man. Threw for 280 yards, a couple touchdowns, obviously against lesser competition, but um, I like I like Iowa State this year, man. I think they brought back a lot of players. They did have to replace their wide receivers, but outside of that, they brought back a lot of talent. They're at home on this one. I'm leaning early. I'm leaning Iowa State on this one. I don't even know if I'm leaning. I think I'm just full blown on Iowa State. Um, but this, just like the game every year, this game, the under always hits on this game for whatever reason. Not even for whatever reason, because Iowa's defense is amazing. The under always hits. It's always a slug, tough rivalry game. I think it's going to be the same this year. Um, my pick is for Iowa State, about 3.5 right now. Um, I like that. I like that. I think it's going to be like last year about a field goalish game either way, whoever does win. I think it's going to be a one possession game, a tough physical game, but I do like Iowa State. There's just more to like about Iowa State. They can move the ball on offense. They play tough, physical Matt Campbell defense. And again, until Iowa puts out a competent, not even a good, just a competent offense, um, I can never just jump on board with them as them being a serious playoff contending team because they have the rest of the pieces to do it. They have the defense, they have the coaching, their special teams always good, their punter is always good, but it's always the offense that holds them back. And I think until they get that figured out, I'd never see Iowa being a true serious playoff contending team in the Big West or in the Big Ten. But so for this one, I think I'm going Iowa State to cover the -3.5 spread on this one. Next game we're gonna hit on is Illinois versus Duke. This is a sneaky underrated game. I think this has a chance to be an excellent game. The early line on this one is Illinois is only favored by -2.5, so I think Vegas also thinks this is going to be, a close, tough game. Duke is at home. Both of these teams have looked good early in the season, but again, like I've sound like a broken record, there's not a lot of competition to really test these teams out. Luke Altmaier in Illinois picked up right where they left off. He had a good first game, threw for a couple touchdowns and 200 plus yards. And so did Darian Minshaw. He looked good in his first game, throwing for 3-4 touchdowns. Um, I think this game is going to be won on the defensive side for both teams. Manny Diaz, obviously a defensive minded coach. Um, Put out a good Duke roster last year. Duke was very competitive last year, finishing 9-3. Obviously, I think they upgraded at quarterback from Malik Murphy to Darian Minshaw. So I do like that. So I think this is going to be a good game for both teams early in the season to kind of test out the rest of the roster, because we both know the quarterback position for both teams is solid. Obviously, Luke Altmaier coming back is a veteran, key player. So I have no questions about both of these offensive quarterbacks or both of these offenses. It's really the defenses that I really want to see. Brett Bielema, he's obviously kind of a defensive-minded coach, and he always puts out a tough physical roster. So I think that's going to be where this game is won and lost is which defense can kind of establish the line of scrimmage, can kind of limit the other teams to or hold the teams or force the teams to more turnovers. So I'm really interested to see both sides of these defenses. I'm leaning Illinois on this one. I know Duke's at home, but I am slightly leaning Illinois. I do think this is going to be a close game. I think Vegas has the spread on this pretty right. I think if Illinois was at home, they'd probably be 5.5 point favorite, but being on the road, um, the Duke crowd is underrated, man. They can get out for the football games, and especially when you're bringing in a top-ranked team, I think that crowd is going to be electric, and I think it's going to be more of a tough environment than people will think. But I do think Illinois, Luke Altmaier, a veteran quarterback, I do think he will hang in there and lead his team to the win on this one. Another sneaky underrated game we have this week is SMU and Baylor. Um, this is a old classic Southwest Conference game. Two Texas teams going at it. Baylor traveling to Dallas. This is a pretty interesting game to me because um, I'm curious to see how Baylor bounces back after the loss to Auburn. I know they weren't favored. I think at the final spread or the final spread was Baylor was a 1.5 underdog, so it was basically a pick 'em. But that was a game where a lot of people expected Baylor to play well and to actually beat Auburn, and I was one of those people. It was one of the games that I got wrong. Um, Auburn was really able to run all over the field on Baylor because Baylor's defense was pretty solid when it came to the passing defense, and limiting explosive plays and key plays through the air. But they let Jackson Arnold run for 150 yards and two touchdowns. The offensive Auburn total ran for I think over 300 or close to 300 yards. So they were just getting gashed through the ground, and that was pretty. So is usually a tough defensive minded coach. So I was pretty surprised to see that, and I'm curious what the game plan for SMU will be. Um, do they watch that film and see that maybe Baylor's run defense is just not good and expose that, especially with an athletic running quarterback, with Kevin Jennings. I'm curious to see what way SMU goes. Uh, the total over and under on this game is at 64 and a half. So Vegas thinks this is going to be an absolute shootout, and I wouldn't be surprised because both of these offenses can be electric. Baylor, although they did lose to Auburn, they had a lot of success through the air. Sawyer Robertson was throwing the ball, and he actually looked really, really good against a solid, defense in Auburn, a solid SEC defense. So I think this does have the potential to be a shootout. I wouldn't go, I wouldn't be confident enough to bet 64 and a half because that is a lot of points. But I would not be surprised if both of these teams get close to 30 points. As far as the game, I do think this is going to be a tough, close game. Um, I like Baylor on this one. I think I've picked all favorites up to this point. SMU is minus 2.5. I like Baylor, man. I think they clean up their defense from the game against Auburn. I think they clean up that run defense and have success stopping Jennings and the running backs of SMU. Um, I just I don't know. I think SMU may have lost too many key players from last year. Again, their offense looked good in the first game, but they played a nobody like East Texas or something like that. But I thought coming into this year that SMU would take a slight step back. And I think this is a tough game against the Baylor team who is not trying to go 0 2, who's trying to, stay. Obviously, they're still alive in the Big 12, but they don't want to start 0 2. So I think Baylor is going to have a bounce back game. Dave Aranda, like I said, good defensive minded coach. I think he's going to clean up some stuff on the defensive end. And I think they have success. I'm going to take Baylor to cover the spread, 2.5 points. I'll take them to cover that. Again, I'm leaning Baylor. I'm picking Baylor. But SMU obviously has more than a fair chance of winning this game. But I'm going with Baylor. Baylor plus 2.5. The final game that we will touch on for week 2, Arizona State versus Mississippi State. Um, I'm excited to watch this game. I think how improved Mississippi State is. Obviously, they were the run of the litter in the SEC last year. Just really didn't have a lot of talent week in and week out to really compete with really anybody. I was a little disappointed how they played against Southern Miss last week. That was a pretty. I think that game was like 10-13 at halftime. Southern Miss is a rebuilding program that I mean, I know they got a lot of guys from Marshall, but this is still a team that won 3 or 4 or 5 games last year, finished last in this Sun Belt. Um, I thought Mississippi State would have time disposing of them, but they did struggle a little bit. Eventually pulled away. Arizona State, not looking as buttoned up as I would expect them to be with a returning quarterback with Sam Levitt, but there was a lot to like against their game. Um, I think the biggest question with Arizona State was can they replace Scatterboo? Obviously, the all-purpose, all-do running back from Arizona State last year, and I thought they did a pretty good job, man, because they ran for over 200 yards, and it was almost running back by committee. Obviously, Sam Levitt, he is an athlete. He broke off for a 50-plus yard gain. He ran for 70-ish yards. Kyson Brown, he ran for 70-plus yards. Raleek Brown, he ran for 30 to 40 yards. So I think early on, until they maybe get a solid rotation, or I think they're going to try and do just a running back by committee, which is I think in this new age it's always a good thing. There's a lot of elite teams out there who have two solid. Obviously, Notre Dame has Love and Price. Louisville has Duke Watson and Isaac Brown. I think that's the way to go when you can get a good rotation. Don't have to get guys hurt. So I am excited to see this game. Um, I'm picking Arizona State. I think they brought back a lot of key pieces last year that give them the slight edge over Mississippi State. Obviously, Sam Levitt, I think he's a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the country. Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver from last year. It's just, I just, Mississippi State looked really, really bad last year, man. And Blake Shapen, he really hasn't improved much. Where did he? I think he came from Oklahoma State. I want to say. Um, Last year was his first year at Mississippi State. Um, I just, I just can't put my stock in Mississippi State on this one, man. Arizona State, I think they're going to be right up there in the Big 12 race with Utah and Iowa State to obviously make the playoffs. It's on the road. Mississippi State, Stark Vegas. I know it can get rowdy. I know it probably will get rowdy to have a ranked team coming in there. The Cowbells are going to be out. The Cowbells are going to be clinging. But I think Sam Levitt is just too good of a quarterback. I think the connection he has with Jordan Tyson is just too good, and I think that defense is going to show up and stop Mississippi State enough to win. Um, I'm taking. Oh, man, I I might. You know what? I'm gonna put my foot down. I am taking Arizona State to cover the spread. I think it was at 6.5. I do think Mississippi State can cover. That's still, an SEC team against a Big 12 team. So, but I gotta take Arizona State on this one to cover. Like I said, I just saw a lot of bad from Mississippi State last year, and I know it's a new year, new season. But I also saw the game against Southern Miss, and I did not see a lot of good stuff that I liked to make me think that they're going to beat Arizona State. So we're taking the Sun Devils to cover that spread, baby. That's all we got for the week 2 previews. Hoping to have a better week than last week. I just realized I took, I think, 4 out of the 5 games. I took the favorites, so that makes me a little nervous. When you're going with all the favorites, that something bad is about to happen. But um, like I said, there's not a lot of high level games today, so I think there's going to be a lot of big spreads this weekend. So there's going to be chances for teams to make some noise, uh, bring out an upset, and shake things up. But those are my picks for the weekend. Tail if you want. I probably wouldn't, but do it at your own discretion. Well, I appreciate you for listening. Thank you.